Hello and welcome to World Bank Live. I'm Paul Blake. In the last few minutes, the World Bank Group has announced a massive $500 million program to assist countries battling a locust plague unfolding in parts of the Middle East and Africa. It's a crisis unfolding alongside and compounded by the all too well-known coronavirus pandemic, and it is threatening the livelihoods and food supply of millions. We've got a great program coming up for you over the next 20 to 30 minutes or so, including two World Bank experts in discussion, both of whom have been instrumental in crafting this response. But first, let's get a few more details on how this plague has unfolded. Well, to learn more about the crisis and what the World Bank is doing to help countries affected, I'm pleased to be joined by both Melissa Williams, the World Bank's Senior Rural Development Specialist, and Afrah al-Ahmadi, the World Bank's Senior Social Protection Specialist. Welcome to you both.
Thank you. Thank you.
Melissa, I want to start with you and ask you just to give us a kind of brief, broad chronological account of how this crisis has unfolded. We got a bit of it in that video there, but maybe you can explain a bit more about how this plague has unfolded.
Okay, just quickly, and I actually found out we're in an anniversary week. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations explained today that this really started about 2 years ago this week. And it started with a very rare cyclone that hit in the Arabian Peninsula that created a bloom of vegetation that allowed the locust population to grow out of control. They were hit by yet another cyclone, which allowed an explosion of the locust, and that continued to grow through 2018. By June of 2019, the locusts had landed into the Horn of Africa, particularly Somalia and Ethiopia. There were some control measures, but then another cyclone hit the Horn of Africa, creating even more water and vegetation, allowing the population to grow. By December, at the end of December, they had entered Kenya, and they have proceeded into Uganda, now South Sudan. They had even touched into Tanzania and Democratic Republic of the Congo for a few weeks.
It's fascinating, that interplay between the cyclones and how that's affected these insect populations, and just the scale, the geographic scale you're talking about there. Afrah, I just want to turn to you, and maybe you can give us a sense of just how many people are being affected by these swarms.
Right. Thank you, Paul. I'm very pleased to be part of this conversation. If we only look at the Horn of Africa, there are already around 22 million people who are severely food insecure. So a crisis that, like the locust, will only exacerbate the situation. According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, there will be additional 3 million farmers and 500,000 pastoralists who will be added to people who are severely insecure. Now, these numbers are also likely to increase over the coming months, and that's because the control of the locust is likely to require a number of months, if not a number of seasons, to bring it down to a manageable level. Now, to make things worse, most of the countries affected by the locust are also countries who are experiencing multiple shocks. We have, of course, the COVID-19 shock, but also this region is also experiencing shocks of floods, and some countries are also going through a conflict. So what we can say from all of these situations is that lives and livelihoods of millions of people in the region and beyond are really at stake.
Yeah, and it seems like, one of the things that makes it so tragic is a lot of people already food insecure there, more people potentially becoming food insecure because of this. Melissa, I just want to jump back to you. What has, this plague meant in terms of that supply of food for ordinary people living in the affected areas so far?
Okay, well, we know that it's already doing damage to crops, and assessments are ongoing. One thing that we have to point out is that it's difficult to do the assessments in some of these areas because of the conflict situation that are also present in these areas. Just to give you a sense of how damaging the locust can be, a small swarm would be maybe 1 square kilometer. It can have anywhere from 40 to 80 million locusts, and it can eat as much in one day as 35,000 people. Now, based on the numbers that we've seen, we have run some damage estimates, and we project that the damages and losses to agriculture and livestock in 2020 in East Africa and Yemen alone will be about 8.5 billion. Wow. So, and that is a significant impact on the food supply.
Let's just take a quick moment to pause and welcome everyone who's tuning in around the globe. Let's take a quick look at some of the folks who are out there. I see Irish in India, Godwin in Ghana. We've got Judy in Kenya, Barbaros in Turkey, Olaf in Germany. Welcome to you all, and welcome to everyone else who's out there. This is World Bank Live, and for those that are just joining us, the World Bank Group this morning announced a $500 million program aimed at assisting countries who are battling a locust crisis unfolding across parts of the Middle East and Africa. We've got 2 experts on the line filling us in on all the details, Melissa Williams and Afrah al-Ahmadi. Afrah, before the break, Melissa was filling us in on what the locust plague means for food supplies. However, it's not just the food supply that is threatened here. Of course, it's many people's livelihoods, people who are connected to whether it's farming or other industries. Could you, give us a sense about the economic impact, about the impact on jobs specifically that is concerning you now as this plague unfolds?
Yeah, that's right. So this is really a dual shock situation. Beside a food security shock, there is also an economic shock, and jobs are significantly impacted. The regions that are impacted by the locusts do rely heavily on the agriculture sector for employment. So millions of people rely on their livelihood as well as jobs on this sector. And we can think of 2 broad sort of categories of people whose jobs are impacted. On the one hand, we have families who depend on their direct produce of crops and livestock for income generation, farmers, herders. But also there's a wide range of people who earn wages and have jobs in the supply chain that is linked to the agriculture sector. This is people like wage farmers, transporters, traders. So really a wide range of jobs have been and will continue to be impacted. The challenge is that people have really limited alternatives. And that's because the job market is very strained because of the COVID-19 as well as the other crises that are unfolding in these countries. And that makes social protection measures really a very vital alternative for these people.
And Melissa, you're the rural development specialist for folks who maybe just tuned in here at the bank. And I kind of had this question I wanted to ask you is, swarms of locusts have been recorded in some of these areas for centuries. Why do you think, what's the research telling you of why it's reached a crisis point this year?
It's really, that's a great question because it's a toxic mix of, I guess, climate change and then conflict and fragility. So I mentioned that you had the 2 cyclones hit the Arabian Peninsula, very rare event, and then another cyclone hit the Horn of Africa, and then in general in the Horn of Africa we've had an exceptional rainy seasons, consecutive high rainy seasons. This has allowed the populations to explode because it's created the vegetation they need to feed and grow. At the same time, some of the first mover countries, the countries that would be the first to move to control the populations, are caught up in conflict right now. The first one is Yemen. That was the first domino to fall because they just couldn't put the control operations in place in time to control it. Then to come over to when the swarms come over, they're hitting Somalia, which is also still building back from decades of conflict. So you have this toxic mix that has led to the conditions for just what we're calling now an upsurge of the population of locusts. And the fear is that without the appropriate control, by the end of the year, it will be officially a plague of locusts, which is the worst condition of locust population and expansion.
And it sounds like there's a lot of kind of compounding factors here. You talked about conflict, there's the ongoing pandemic, there's a bunch of stuff that must make responding to and researching the swarm quite difficult. I wanted to also ask, on that, how has the fight against the coronavirus pandemic affected the response to the locust swarms? Like, how does that operationally affect things?
It's had some significant effects. One, because it's really, COVID has shut down the trade channels. So the equipment that they need and the insecticides that they need in order to fight these swarms are not getting to them in time. Also, the international experts and the extra labor come in and end up being quarantined. FAO told me, I hate to scoop them on this, so they'll have a nice story on this. They're trying to move helicopters from South Africa to Somalia to help in the surveillance. It was going to take over 26 days because in every country where the helicopter stopped, they would have to go through 13 days of quarantine. So the helicopter pilots actually, whenever they landed, never left their helicopters, slept on the tarmac, woke up, took off again to the next country so that they could reduce it from 26 days to 3 days. So people are taking extraordinary measures to try and move it forward despite all of the constraints.
Just massively complicating that response effort there.
Yes.
So we'll jump to another break in just a second. So everyone out there, just let us know where you are. We'll try to give you a little shout out here. But I have a question for both of you, and I'll start with Afrah, if she wants to respond first. And that is, my understanding is that this won't last just one growing season. That it's not sort of they're here this year and then they're going to be gone next year. Can you explain sort of how long the effects will be felt? And then maybe when Afrah's done, Melissa, you could talk a little bit about why they stick around longer than just one growing season.
Paul?
Yes, Afrah, you still able to hear us?
Yes, sorry.
Could you just tell us a little bit about why the effects of this could be felt for years on out, and how long do you think they'll be felt?
Right. No, I think it, again, it is because we are in a situation on these countries are really experiencing multiple of shocks. But also it will be a factor of how quickly and speedy countries will be able to control the locust. I think Melissa can speak into that. But I think given that multiplicity of crises that these countries are experiencing, protecting of lives and livelihoods is going to continue to be really needed for years to come. We already know the longer than anticipated or hoped for effect of COVID-19. And now we have this crisis for the specific regions. So countries and governments will be under a lot of pressure to continue delivering protective programs as well as controls to these different crises.
And Melissa, could you just talk to us a little bit about why the locusts will stick around for more than one season, that it's not just something that's going to be contained to 2020?
Well, essentially, they're in such large numbers now that control is very difficult. They're in breeding in remote areas and breeding in areas that are not traditional areas. So new nymphs and hopper bands, the younger at their younger stages are emerging in places that are not normally breeding areas, making it very difficult to control. I can tell you that the last big upsurge in Africa was in 2003, and it lasted for 2 years, and that was in West Africa. So I think we can easily anticipate this will go on for at least another year.
Well, let's take a moment to pause and welcome. We see a bunch of people tuning in. We got Gloria in Nigeria, Francisco in Chile, Mustafa in Morocco. Who else do we have there? Ali in Kenya, and who else? Judy from Kenya. Thanks to everyone who's tuning in, everyone else out there. We really appreciate you taking the time this morning to be with us. You're with World Bank Live, and we've got Melissa Williams and Afrah al-Ahmadi on the line right now, just after the World Bank's announcement this morning that it is launching a $500 million program to support countries affected by the locust swarms that are unfolding across the Middle East and Africa. Afrah, I just want to turn back to you now and start to talk a little bit about some of the solutions that we can take to address the effects of this swarm that is sweeping across these regions. Can we explore a little bit about how, the support that your team in that $500 million program, how that will be used? I understand that, things like social safety nets, like cash transfers, will be a key element. You're the senior social protection specialist here. Can you tell us a little bit more about that component of the program and how it will affect those that have been affected by the locust swarms?
Yeah, no, you're right. The social safety net is a central part of the overall solution that this program offers countries to address the impact of the locust crisis. Because social safety nets, by design and by sort of objective, they protect lives and livelihood. The program provides a range of emergency assistance in the form of cash transfers, as well as employment generation through cash for works intervention. It also so cash transfers we have a lot of evidence from previous crises that they play a very critical role in enhancing the purchasing power of households. In crisis, people are able, with cash assistance, they're able to meet their basic needs, food and basic assistance. They're able also to continue to seek urgent services. We also see time and time that at times also they protect productive livelihood of households if otherwise would be sold to meet the basic needs. In addition to this immediate and sort of emergency assistance that helps people smooth consumption and meet basic needs, the program also offers packages of seeds and fodders to farmers and pastoral communities. This will enable affected communities to rehabilitate their livelihood as well as recover quickly.
And I want to stay with you, Afrah, for the next one and talk a little bit more about some of the maybe the less obvious effects. And I imagine some of those cash transfers help, blunt some of the knock-on effects. The bank is very concerned about human capital and about how we invest in people, their healthcare, their education, social protection. Can you explain why human capital is such a concern in light of the locust crisis that's unfolding?
Yeah. So what happens is during crisis, it's the poor and most vulnerable are the group that is hit harder, and that is because they have the least ability to adapt to a crisis situation. They're the group that would most likely have no savings to fall on, and also have very minimal, if any, access to any form of an insurance. So vulnerable people then adapt by coping negative mechanisms. This would be a type of either eating less or having to choose less nutritious food for their families. They also at times withdraw children from school, either because they can't afford the school-related expenses or they need to send kids for work. So that's where these negative coping mechanisms have a long-term effect, because they do compromise the human capital of these households. If you take an example of nutrition, so when pregnant women and infant small children eat are not well nourished, that means compromises of the cognitive development of children. This has an impact way beyond the short-term emergency, because these children would most likely not be able to reach their full potential later in life, whether in school performance or in skills accumulation, and later on in life, in their productive life, in the job market. So that's why social protection in general, social safety nets programs are so critical, not just to meet the immediate need of food, but also to preserve the human capital of impacted households for future. So they really are smart investments for governments and communities, because they do cost way less. They cost less exponentially over the long run.
Supporting people supporting people to bolster economies and preserve human capital there. Melissa, I want to get you back in the mix now and ask, agriculture in many countries has been decimated by the locust swarms already. How will this program help with the longer term recovery, as the swarms start to die down?
Okay, thanks. Yes, and just to reiterate, while the crisis is ongoing, the social safety nets are critical to keep the houses stable. And so that they don't sell off their assets. In terms of both livestock and agricultural production, we'll be coming in with seed packets and trying to introduce improved seed varieties. Take advantage of the crisis and bring in some hardier varieties of food and diverse seeds for production, so that these farmers can resume production as quickly as possible. And this will be supplemented with a basket of inputs to help with that production. Also, where needed, emergency fodder, because we need to maintain the nutrition of the animals and the health of the animal population in the area, and then help our clients, restore the pasture and rangelands to productivity. And the idea is to build back better, build back the production ecosystem, restore the pollinator populations, build up the fauna base or flora base, so that it can be a productive landscape once again. Right now, locusts come in and they will eat every bit of photosynthetic material that they can. And that we need to help them build that back as quickly as possible.
Just want to stick with you for another question. You guys are announcing this program this morning. What countries are covered in this initial phase, and do you expect the program to be kind of rolled out further over time?
Yes. Okay, so the first 4 mover countries are some of the worst affected countries right now, and that's Djibouti, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Uganda. We have 2 countries that are already well in development for the second phase, and those projects will be coming out before June. And that's one in Somalia, which Afrah is deeply involved in, is leading, and then another one in Yemen. The entire purpose of the multi-phase programmatic approach is that it is flexible. So essentially, we're pre-positioning this 500 million. 200 million is going to be committed very quickly, and that leaves us some expansion room. So as countries are threatened by locusts, they can join the program. We have the technical designs, already there, so that it's easier to design the program, negotiate, and get moving on the ground.
I imagine it gives you some flexibility to be able to respond as the crisis evolves.
Yes, and we're working very closely with FAO and the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, looking at their projections to try and get a sense of which countries are going to be affected next. And, we're already in discussions with several West African countries, because they're watching to see how the swarms move.
The storm on the horizon, sort of. Afrah, I just want to turn to you for the last question. Looking out over the longer term, how can countries, build their resilience up to such crises? And is that something the bank is looking at helping them out with?
Yeah. Yeah, I think building service delivery systems is so critical for countries' resilience to respond to shocks. The World Bank has been and continue to be supporting many countries in developing and instituting social safety net delivery systems, reaching to impacted population and delivering assistance. It's not an easy task, and it takes a lot of time to set up these systems. So having these systems already in place plays a major role in enabling a rapid response. Now, fortunately, for most of the countries that are impacted by the locust, we have supported these countries over a decade or more in building the social safety net delivery system. So they're really ready to hit the ground ready as soon as resources are available. These systems are also adaptive. So they, by design, they are prepared by governments with the support from the bank to be adaptive to shocks. And adaptability is so critical because it enables a rapid identification of who are the impacted people and what's the best ways to reach them. Many of these programs also utilize technology to enhance the rapid responsiveness. An example of that will be the use of mobile money to deliver cash rapidly and also safely to beneficiaries during crisis. So we have really seen it time and time again that countries that are well prepared in terms of institutional setup and an accumulated experience and delivery systems are far more better equipped to protect the vulnerable people during crisis and shocks.
So it sounds like laying some of the groundwork so that you'll be able to reach those people that you'll need to reach when the next crisis happens. And that seems like a lot of what you're saying there. So Afrah al-Ahmadi and Melissa Williams, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Melissa Williams is the World Bank's Senior Rural Development Specialist, and Afrah al-Ahmadi is the World Bank's Senior Social Protection Specialist. They joined us from their home in the Washington, D.C., their homes in the Washington, D.C. area. A huge thanks to both of them for their time. If you joined us late, you can head over to live.worldbank.org, where you can watch this back for free, as well as all the other episodes we've been producing in the past few weeks related to COVID-19 and the other work of the World Bank. We've got more great programs coming up for you over the next week or over the next few weeks. You'll be able to find out more details at live.worldbank.org as they become available. In the meantime, to learn more about the World Bank and its work in responding to the COVID-19 crisis, head on over to worldbank.org/coronavirus. Until next time, stay healthy and stay safe, and we'll see you back here soon.